This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? Thanks, guys. Back to you.
We be cruising into Friday, which means it's time for another installment of the wrestling podcast that nobody knows but everybody needs. And you all know what that is. It's the Five Starr Wrestling Report, baby. There's only one. Hope everyone's doing well. Things are, kind of falling into place here. Not exactly the way I intended. But hey, adventure. And as we chug along with the classic shows, we'll get into all the joyous talk in just a moment here. As always, make sure you subscribe, comment, like the show if you have not already. You can find us on YouTube and Rumble on Mondays and Fridays. For the time being, we're still doing 2 weekly podcasts. I have no idea what the status of that is going to be come January. It's all dependent on how things shape up with these different streaming platforms. And as long as we have access to the classic territory footage, we're going to continue that part of the series. But we're definitely arriving at the big turning point with Crockett Promotions. And I'm happy we at least made it through the peak golden years of Mid-Atlantic. Because we're now entering the dark ages. So let's get into the TBS studio program. I love this video cap description. Speculation runs rampant over Sir Oliver Humperdinck's newest acquisition, Bam Bam Bigelow. Speculation about what? Why he's come to WCW? Didn't Humperdinck kind of make that clear in his promo last week? The fact that Bam Bam wants a shot at the World Heavyweight title? I always love when they come up with these really vague screen caps to hook viewers in. Like 99% of the time it has nothing to do with the actual content of the program. Just to sort of blaze through a couple early things here. There was a cold open with the Russian assassins calling out Ivan and Nikita to a fight. Nothing happened. The announcers also plugged all the usual rundowns, most of which was just leftover material from the previous episode. They're hoping to have an interview with Jimmy Garvin next week. They've also got the upcoming Midsouth area tours. A couple live events coming up in Saginaw, Michigan. What show was from Saginaw recently that we reviewed? Was it Retro Raw? I remember making a joke about Saginaw. Anyway, that all led to the opening squash. The Road Warriors taking on Rick Allen and Terry Jones. Dude, I swear to God, there will be like 3 weeks that go by where we never see the Road Warriors in any capacity. Then they just randomly show up for a 60-second squash. They're more over every single time we see them. It's the exact same match every time. Nothing ever changes. But the people never get sick of it. They will always go nuts for Hawk and Animal steamrolling over two worthless hacks. The best part of this was Hawk trying to clothesline Allen like an absolute fucking idiot. Rick Allen refused to bump. So Hawk just leveled him with a left-handed lariat. drove him down to the mat as hard as humanly possible. Just killed him. And then Animal gave him a middle rope power slam for the 3. It was almost as epic as their post-match interview, where the Animal spent basically a full minute bitching about how the Road Warriors don't need partners to win championship gold. The fact that they can beat up 5 or 6 guys at a given time. But it's because of Jim Crockett, where they're bound by contract to team up if they're going to go after tag team gold. What? What the hell did that have to do with anything? You know, it almost made as much sense as Hawk talking about his return from the sands of Kahana in Maui. For the record, he's talking about Hawaii. I know it's not the most documented location in the U.S. This was a total Hawk promo in 1988. I had no idea what the fuck he was yammering about. All I know is he talked about Hawaiian terminology for hors d'oeuvres, which apparently are called poo-poos. He said that he slapped the first guy that tried to offer him poo-poos. Talked about how he got bored tanning over there because he couldn't kick people's asses without going to prison. You think I'm kidding? That is exactly what he said. Go search for the clip right now. Or if you're a Peacock subscriber, go check out the October 8th, 1988 edition of NWA on the Studio Show. It's in the first 5 minutes. Hawk talked about poo-poo and not being able to beat up people on vacation because he would risk getting incarcerated. That was how they opened the program. I would just like to remind everybody that business at this point was in the doldrums for Crockett. They're about to sell to the Turner Network in a little under a month. Here's fucking Hawk on live cable television making poop jokes and joking about getting arrested. Not a good look. Then we came back for Ron Simmons versus The Menace. It was a hideously dull squash where Ron beat him up for 5 minutes and won with a flying shoulder tackle. That's all I cared to say about it. And then we had Dusty Rhodes joining Simmons over at the booth. He talked about Burt Reynolds. Made a comment about how anytime you mention a football player, you have to say hi to your mama. A joke that apparently only got over with Dusty and Ron, because the rest of the studio did not react. And because it was Ron Simmons in 1988, couldn't help but spread the good word to all the kids. Say no to drugs, boys and girls. Don't give in to peer pressure. You know, I'm watching this footage back again. I'm trying to figure out at what point in my life I became a Ron Simmons fan. Because this good, clean, wholesome version of Ron Simmons in 1988, it was so paint by numbers. At this point, he may as well just walk out there every week with a Hustle, Loyalty, Respect t-shirt on. I mean, I thought Super Cena was one-dimensional in terms of his act. At least Cena changed up a promo a time or two. God, this stuff is so boring and generic. And then up next, we had the Fantastics versus Keith Steinborn and Jerry Price. Bobby and Tommy were sporting their mustard-colored short trunks for the occasion. Could also call them piss yellow. But we already made a poop joke in the first 5 minutes. Don't want to overdo it. I think I found my new favorite jobber on the studio shows, though. not even as a form of irony. I genuinely enjoyed watching Jerry Price feed and bump around for the Fantastics. He took like 2 or 3 monkey flips at various points in the match. Looked like he'd been shot out of a cannon. Now granted, he got totally lost at the end and started fucking up spots left and right. The best was when he botched an atomic drop and basically tripped backwards after stumbling into the ropes. Tommy Rogers just kind of sold it like, really, dude? But they eventually went over with an assisted flipping senton. They methodically kept Steinborn out of the ring as long as humanly possible. Probably a good call on their end. And then they took a minute to pitch the footage of what I believe was a recent TV match they aired on the Sunday syndicated show. It is the Fantastics and the Sheepherders, which ended in a double disqualification after Tommy Young lost control of the match. They pretty much started the video feed from the point where all 4 guys were wrestling over the New Zealand flagpole. Bodies are getting chucked around the ring left and right. And then we get the classic fight-off deal where they all brawl to the locker room. It was not as epic as the promo battle last week, where Butch and Luke spent like 3 minutes talking over the Fantastics and being raging lunatics the whole time. But this is fine. They're building up tension for the U.S. Tag Title Tournament, where they apparently have not determined seeds for the brackets yet. Although I think Jim said the tournament isn't happening until like November. So they got time. Then we had Dick Murdoch versus Cruel Connection number 1. I don't know, dude. There's something about the visual of Murdoch beating on a geek dressed like a lima bean. Got a chuckle out of me. Almost as funny as JR spending the entire match making blatant redneck jokes at Murdoch. It's always fun watching him, though. Never a dull moment in Dick Murdoch squashes. Even just run-of-the-mill ones. It's not enough for Dickie to just have his way with a job guy and fuck around with him. But he has to get the fans engaged by constantly ripping at Cruel's mask. Turning it around to blind him. Trying to yank it off his head. I mean, he did this for like the entire match. Teddy's warning him constantly, "Don't you do it, Dickie, or I have to disqualify you." And you see Murdoch contemplating it a couple times. The ending in particular was fantastic. He gives Cruel Connection the brainbuster, and then he's hovering over him like, should I go for the pin? Or should I go for the mask? Teddy's wagging his finger at him like, don't do it, Dick. Don't do it. So Murdoch finally covers him for the 3. And then he instantly goes after the mask. Teddy's like, no, damn it, Murdoch, I warned you. For the record, the added suspense of seeing a Cruel Connection member unmasked, that's what makes it so laughable. Like anybody actually gave a fuck which guy was under the hood. Actually, wasn't it just a couple of the local jobbers that worked the gimmick? I forget, wasn't it like George South and Jack Victory or something like that? It's not like we were talking about Tully and Arn. So that brought out Ric Flair to the booth for a promo. First, he talked about Barry Switzer. Made some reference about the University of Texas football team. Mainly as a shot at Dick Murdoch and Dusty, I think. No idea what he was talking about. It's college football. Who gives a fuck? Then he called out Lex Luger. He said the October weather is getting a bit frosty, so Luger's been wearing less sleeveless tops. He's been keeping his body covered up more frequently. But it doesn't matter how many times Luger switches the wardrobe up. Bottom line, same result stands when you put Luger up against Flair for the world title. Flair wins. And he wasn't wrong. And then he turned the subject over to Bam Bam. And the bulk of the talk here mainly dealt with him calling Bam Bam Fat Boy. And the reason for it?
He's fat!
Been a long time since we broke out the Steiner line. But that's really it. Ric Flair spent 2 minutes calling Bam Bam Bigelow fat. That was how they built up the face-off. And I guess this was supposed to anger Bam Bam? Being called fat? Well, I can conclude one thing. We've seen a lot of fatzos make their way in and out of the territories over the years. To call Bam Bam fat? Apparently Ric Flair forgot about the mighty Wilbur. Remember him? Seems like eons ago. I do sort of like that concept, though. Ric Flair would rather completely ignore Bam Bam's ability in the ring, literally so he could just poke fun of him about his weight. Like, Bam Bam, you're a heck of an athlete. You could do some amazing stuff in the ring. But you're fat. And your wife left you. And you smell like wet farts. So childish. Yet it somehow works. And the irony here, too, right after break, Oliver Humperdinck joins David Crockett at the booth. These snide comments about fat people. You know, Humperdinck wasn't exactly what you would call a Greek god from a physical standpoint. Just throwing it out there. But he took a minute to put over the beast from the East. The man as heavy as a 1957 Chevy. Okay. And this was all to set up a videotape they aired of Bam Bam squashing somebody on the Sunday TBS program. This is where we also learn from Tony Schiavone, ever the astute play-by-play commentator. Bam Bam Bigelow is not your average bank executive. Well, maybe by 1988 standards, no. In these days, I come to expect anything and everything in the land of the DEI. That is such a Tony Schiavone line. Not your average bank executive. Notice how he specified average. So he didn't roll it out as a possibility. I mean, there wasn't really much to say about the squash. Other than a great moment here where the job guy tried to run directly past Bam Bam during a shoot-off attempt. Bam Bam just grabbed the guy and threw him down to the mat face first. That was fun. But then we went back to the booth where Humperdinck wrapped up by calling out both Horsemen members. Indeed, I'm sad to say we're down to 2 at this point. First, he called out Barry Windham. Said that Bam Bam's got his sights set on the U.S. heavyweight title. And then he's also got his sights set on the world heavyweight title. He told Flair there are 2 types of men in this world. The uneducated people that run their mouths and try to stick their chests out at the expense of others. But we all know Flair has the best education money can buy. The second kind of man is the spineless coward that runs scared. Flair should know that if he keeps poking the bear's going to fight back. And, all things considered, it was a pretty good promo. Nothing wrong with the delivery. But Humperdinck drummed up a handful of boos by the end, which I don't think they were expecting. Studio fans did not like the idea of Flair's title being in jeopardy against Bam Bam. Really not a good sign. All that effort in trying to bring in a new hot babyface to challenge for the World Heavyweight title, fans are booing it pretty steadily. This is kind of that moment where the balance between smart and casual fans really started to get offset here in the public sphere. When it became more popular to cheer the bad guys and boo the good guys. Especially when we're talking about the cool guys like the Horsemen. It's unfortunate, but it's kind of the reality of the fan base. I mean, they may have even cheered Bam Bam if he would have been going up against an ordinary heel. But the Horsemen were not ordinary heels. They were crowd favorites. And if the fans saw a viable threat to one of their guys, they did not take to it very well. So that stood out here. From there, we came back for Russian Assassin number 1 against Bret Holiday. Relatively boring squash. Spent the entire time holding back vomit looking at Holiday's side boob. Assassin went over with a Russian sickle. Then we came back at the top of Hour 2 for a Lex Luger promo. Flair one line. Luger is definitely dressing more casual for the cooler months. I have absolutely no clue what he said for 50% of this promo. He was totally getting drowned out by the sheep herders who were in the ring. Fans are booing those guys vociferously. The only thing I got out of the promo here was him claiming that he's like a pit bull because he sunk his teeth into Flair's calf and won't let go. Excuse me, what? What the fuck does that mean? Yeah, I got nothing else. Lex Luger is just dead in the water by this point, dude. I think I'm really starting to see why they neglected to put the title on him at Starrcade in December. Among many other reasons. As far as the Sheepherders versus Mike Justice and JC Wild goes, it's every standard Sheepherders match you've seen on the 605 Superstation. They did wacky spots. They let the job guys get in like 2 seconds of offense on them. Then they went over with the double gutbuster. It was significantly less entertaining than their post-match promo, where they spent 2 minutes running down the Fantastics and calling them Yankee dogs. I could not do it justice trying to recap it. I was mesmerized watching Luke Williams the whole time. So, if you don't know the gimmick by now, Luke just kind of repeats shit that Butch says. Here, there was a moment where Butch is talking, and you just see this huge wad of drool start coming down the side of Luke's mouth. I didn't know whether I was grossed out by it or if I thought it was the funniest goddamn thing in the world. Dude, the Sheepwhackers were a one-of-a-kind gimmick. I mean, their matches are lame and boring a lot of the time. But if they get to talk afterwards, I'm okay with it. They get wackier and more off-kilter every single week. And the sad thing is they're basically on their way out the door. When did they leave for the WWF? That's in like a month, isn't it? Maybe less than that. So then we had Rick Steiner versus Kurt Thompson for the TV title. Again, Steiner is not the TV champion. Mike Rotunda is. Technically, I think Steiner is still the Florida heavyweight champion, but they've not been recognizing that belt lately, so maybe they finally dropped it. The story here is that Kevin Sullivan is somehow getting management to sign off on TV title matches despite Rotunda not having to defend the title in said matches. I don't know how that works. Of course, Rick is like a kid in a candy store, getting to hold the TV title belt and pretend like he's the actual champion. I think even JR noted, Rick Steiner is the kind of person that would spend an entire day in Toys R Us and never get bored. Oh, wouldn't we all? If there's ever a chain that we adults wish would be a thing again, Toys R Us was the shit, man. I don't care what anybody says. I mean, where else was I going to buy my action figures in the 90s? Overall, it's a fun little match. Kind of similar to last week's TV title match where Steiner got taken off his feet a handful of times and Sullivan and Rotunda were reading him the riot act the whole time. Thompson gave Steiner a hell of a clothesline early on, too. That looked great. That was the best thing I've seen a jobber on this show do in like 3 years. I'm telling you, man. They missed the boat to do something with Kurt Thompson. That guy could do some shit. Even if he was visibly on the gas, he could still move around the ring. I'd have pushed him. But Steiner basically worked him over in amateur holds. He lost his helmet gear at the end, which Thompson tried to capitalize on by rolling him up. But then Steiner reversed an Irish whip, then went over with the belly-to-belly. Of course, the story at the end was Sullivan raising Rotunda's arm and giving him all the credit. Meanwhile, they blew off Steiner and threw him under the bus like absolute douchebags. So that wasn't very nice. Then we came back for a Midnight Express squash. Right after JC offered his package to David Crockett on live broadcast television. But we'll just ignore that. We do not judge here on the channel. So they wrestled Mike Jackson and Agent Steel. Obviously, they had Corny plug a couple of the big upcoming events they're doing. In addition to the Midsouth tour, they were also promoting the Philly cage match next week with him and J.J. Dillon. Again, I think we talked about this last week. I think that match was supposed to be Tully and Arn against the Midnights for the belts. Obviously, that couldn't happen now. I always love the psychology of Bobby Eaton working with Mike Jackson. It never matters who Jackson's teaming with. Even if the Midnights spend the entire match beating the shit out of the other job guy, Bobby's always going to sell, and he's always going to feed for Mike Jackson. That is a level of professionalism second to none. But he and Mike are going back and forth. It's a swift flurry of offense from both guys. Then eventually Agent Steel tags in. It's right back to Bobby and Stan kicking his ass and having fun with him. So they hit him with a double flapjack. Then Stan rolled him up in some kind of odd-looking grapevine. Not entirely sure what he was going for, but did the job. And then we pitched back to the podium so Cornette could put the finishing touches on the cage match with him and JJ. JJ made a promise that if he could beat Corny in the cage, he would eat his tennis racket. So Corny went ahead and got him some various condiments to help wash the racket down his gullet, including Heinz ketchup, which got a thumbs up from me, being a fellow Pittsburgh native. I think Beautiful Bobby was a fan too, because he was really trying to show off that Heinz bottle. I think he had the old school glass bottle too, back when they actually sold that shit in stores. I mean, you could not find a glass bottle of Heinz ketchup anywhere anymore. Maybe at local markets. That's about it, though. Going to your average grocery store chain, it's all plastic shit. No wonder people's estrogen levels are through the roof. Oh yeah, and JC also bought Dylan some Fixodent, so he could get his dentures back in place after the fact. And as far as the Road Warriors go, since they were out here running their mouths earlier, Corny promised that the Midnights would have the Road Warriors beat 10 minutes before they even knew the match was over. So that Bobby and Stan are smarter, faster, and more capable than the Road Warriors. And if they don't believe them, they can ask the guys the Midnights beat to win the World Tag Belts. Quote, the two guys that would rather switch than fight. Ooh. Shots fired, brother. That one stung. But you know, they were making fucking bank. So who really got the last laugh? Then we had Barry Windham versus Gary Royal. God, this looked like a gym coach beating up a student on the junior wrestling team. The size difference here was impeccable. It's always easy to neglect just how fucking massive Barry was. He never had much of a body during his career. That guy was tall. He went over with the lariat in about a minute. Really wasn't much to it. I just had to point out the size discrepancy between both guys. And that was followed with a Barry JJ promo at the booth. JJ gave a quick retort to Cornette's promo, asserting that the only thing they'll be using those condiments for in the Philadelphia Civic Center is for restocking burgers and hot dogs. He said the sack was apropos because when he threw it in the air and it came down, it reminded JJ that Cornette was a euphemism for that bag. Nothing but hot air. I think somehow in JJ's mind, he thought that line would come off as a burn. God bless him. This was such a lame duck promo. It really was. JJ sounded like an absolute boomer trying to talk smack on Cornette. Just fell flatter than a plate full of piss. Speaking of falling flat, Barry's promo wasn't much better. I don't even know what the hell he was trying to get at. He said Bam Bam shouldn't set his eyes on the U.S. heavyweight title. Then he said Dusty isn't the number one contender. The number one contender is Sting. And it would be that way for a long time, because that's all Sting would ever be, is a contender. Sure. I think I had more passion in that delivery than Barry did. He sounded about as bored as ever. And that brought us to Nikita Koloff and the Blue Demon. I wish I were making that up. Before you ask, the Blue Demon. For those that are asking, was he at least dressed in all blue? No. Of course not. He wore red tights. Amazing. So Nikita won with the sickle in 30 seconds. And then he and Ivan were at the booth afterwards for a promo. Again, really didn't know much about this. Ivan completely lost his train of thought halfway through. Basically called Paul Jones a cockroach and a coward. Saying that he and Nikita were coming for the Russians. That was about it. And then Nikita plugged a match next week between himself and I think Assassin number 2. Said that Paul Jones put together a good Russian team. But the people know who the true superior tag team is when Nikita and Ivan are standing across the ring. And then they wasted another 2 minutes of time with a Larry Zbyszko squash. He and Teddy fought over nunchucks for a minute. And then he beat Eddie Sweat with a neck breaker about 20 seconds later. I have no idea what the hell the point of the nunchucks was. But it really doesn't matter. And then Gary Hart did a show closing promo. He told us that in 3 weeks, he would be bringing a special talent to the NWA. He's the meanest, baddest, biggest, and blackest man anybody has ever seen. Before you come at me, his words, not mine. And he talked about how people have been asking why a talented athlete like Al Perez needs somebody like Gary Hart by his side as a mouthpiece. Who the hell was asking that? I mean, I responded simply, he's a boring motherfucker with one facial expression that nobody wants to see or hear. I think that about covers it. And, well, then he reiterated at the end that 3 weeks from now, coming to the NWA, he's big, he's black, and he's bad. I repeat, not my words. Directly from the mouth of Gary Hart. But I'm waiting with bated breath. I want to see who this big black special advocate is. For the life of me, I have no idea who it is. I'm trying to think of the timeline here. It's not Muda. Because he doesn't come in until like March or April of '89. I vaguely recall him managing Dick Slater and Buzz Sawyer for a period of time. Problem is, none of those two are black. I have no clue. We will see. Couldn't be the one-man gang, right? No. Well, I'm going to keep guessing. I'm going to lose sleep over it. Yeah, the show was kind of hit and miss this week. I really have no further outro for Crockett TV. It was a show. It's pretty much all there is to it. The sale is in 3 weeks, folks. 3 weeks. And you watch these programs and you're like, yep. Can definitely see why. So as we flip the book over to Midsouth, this show opened with the greatest interview segment of all time. I'm not kidding you. I was dying by the end of this thing. It was... You know what this was? it was one of those heel promos where you're just watching two guys scream about this, that, and the other thing. And like, you can tell they're totally lost in their train of thought. They're just spitballing ideas and trying to see what sticks. It's borderline train wreck without actually tipping the entire train off the tracks. My analogy is terrible, but I'll explain. See, y'all might remember, one thing I kind of spoiled with Hacksaw Butch Reed and Jim the Anvil Neidhart, they ended up becoming a pretty steady tag team in Mid-South, right up until Neidhart left the territory in '84. I should more accurately say they were attached at the hip, because their tag team does go south later down the road. But they established at the top of the program, Reed has officially joined up with Neidhart to form this awesome twosome. So we go to a pre-taped interview where Reed is preaching to the Mid-South fans, talking about how he formed the alliance with Neidhart because there's been a conspiracy to try to get under Butch Reed's skin. And the end goal being to obviously get the North American title off of him. So he's talking about this unsanctioned lumberjack match that took place 2 weeks ago, how the whole thing was BS because Hacksaw Duggan brought a bunch of his cronies out to be the lumberjacks. It was a total numbers advantage over Reed the whole time. Now, of course, I'm restating all of this in the best way I can. Butch Reed was struggling to get this out. He was so flustered. So, as he's talking, literally out of nowhere, Jim Neidhart grabs the microphone and he just starts cutting a promo right in the middle of Butch Reed's train of thought. And I see him grabbing this microphone. In my mind, I'm like, I don't ever recall Jim Neidhart being a very good promo throughout his career. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe he will impress me here. He did not impress me here. So he's going off about God knows what. Something about how Butch Reed played pro football and the Anvil played pro football. Therefore, nobody can stop them as a tag team. If people thought the Oakland Raiders were an outlaw team, they haven't seen nothing yet, brother. Reed and Neidhart are the real outlaws. And then he closes by going, and we're not going to wrestle for the Mid-South tag belts. We're just going to go in there and take them. And albeit, I mean, it's not a horrible promo in the traditional sense, because I've seen some horrible promos during my day. It was just so cartoony and so wacky. You're trying to buy these two as the biggest heel threats on the entire roster, but the execution of the promo was like first attempt in promo class. The kind of thing you're expecting guys to be standing in front of a green screen reciting verbiage. Like the agents tell them whether or not they did a good job. God, this was so great. It was so raw, but somehow it worked. And I've said before, I mean, I remember pretty vividly the Butch Reed Anvil tag team in Mid-South. They were a very formidable heel duo. And this all led to their first match as a team on television. It's Hacksaw Reed and the Anvil going up against the Oates cousins, Marty and Jerry. Marty, we determined last week, was Marty Jannetty about a year into his career. Had the total clean-cut babyface look. And obviously, you had to figure this would mainly be a showcase to establish the new heel team of Hacksaw and the Anvil. But it was still fairly competitive. They really had you thinking by the end there that the Oates brothers were about to pull up the upset win. Are they brothers or cousins? I don't know. It seems like the announcers were going back and forth between that. But a lot of the heat was mainly spent working over Marty. And then Jerry got the hot tag. Things broke down into a four-way. They do this spot where Marty cuts off Hacksaw trying to run interference. Jerry Oates actually starts applying his spinning toe hold to Neidhart. But as Hacksaw goes up to try and break the hold up with a flying shoulder tackle, Jerry dodges it so Hacksaw crashes and burns. And, well, albeit things did get kind of messy with Marty not being exactly sure where he was supposed to be for the placement of the double team spots. But they improvised a little bit with Jerry getting dumped over the top rope to the floor while the ref Johnny Martinez was dealing with Marty in the Anvil. That led to the Anvil giving Marty the standing headbutt, followed by a Samoan drop slam on Marty for the pinfall. If we're being overly critical of things here, I do believe Jerry Oates was technically still the legal partner prior to all the mass chaos. In all honesty, I don't think it really mattered. Because the crowd sure as hell didn't notice. I mean, it's not like they beat Magnum TA and Hacksaw Duggan. Good showcase match. Of course, the irony is it's Reed and Neidhart's first match as a tag team, and they've already needed to cheat to win. Classic heel booking right there. Present two giant guys as badasses and still make them find a way to have to cheat to win. Just like the cowards they are. That's old school pro wrestling right there. So that took us to the situation regarding Nikolai Volkov and Boris Zurkov. Well, some may call it a situation. I call it a hopeful sign. Because with what happened here, I'm hoping to God this is the last time we see Boris Zurkov on this program. And JR kind of laid out the story beforehand. You know, they showed a previously taped match between George Weingroff and Boris Zurkov on TV, where Weingroff managed to get the cradle pinfall on Zurkov. And so Nikolai comes down to the ring and denounces and chastises Boris using his native tongue. And he explained that Boris Zurkov wasn't even a real Russian to begin with. Gasp. Say it ain't so. No, it turns out he's one of those fake-ass Russian sympathizers. An American-born citizen with a Russian family lineage. But he ain't blood. So Nikolai proceeded to beat the shit out of him and dump him out of the ring like a sack of potatoes. Cool. And this in turn got Nikolai babyface pops, despite him not actually turning face here. I think the people were just glad to see someone beat up the collective waste of human plasma known as Boris Zurkov. So hopefully that's the end of that cue ball looking goof. I was not a fan of Boris Zurkov, if you couldn't already tell. He sucked from the beginning. Still sucks to this day. So this week we had Nikolai going up against George Weingroff. Not much to really say about it, aside from it being another showcase squash for Nikolai. It was probably the weakest backbreaker finish I've seen Nikolai ever give someone. When he dropped George over his knee the first time, it looked like he was giving his finisher to somebody wrapped in bubble wrap. Like, how can I safely drop this person without popping a single bubble? That was my big takeaway. And we had Frank Levert and Tom Stanton getting served up to JYD and Crusher Darso. Spent the entire match laughing at the job guys here. You could actively tell these two guys did not want to get punched or hit by Dog or Darso. I mean, their bumps and selling were comically atrocious. Darso at one point was in there throwing forearms to Levert and Stanton. Can't remember which one it was. I think it was Levert. He was already taking back bumps before Darso even landed the forearm to his chest. I'm like, did they purposefully find the two biggest pussies to put in the ring with Dog and Darso? I mean, that sounds like something Bill Watts or Grizzly Smith would do. So it actually made for a fun squash. And what otherwise would have been just another ordinary match on the show. You know, we talked about Darso's face turn the other week. The match he had with Dog kind of gave him that realization that he should take his losses like a man. When General Akbar tried to offer him that $500 or whatever it was to take out Dog the week afterwards, well, that's where Crusher Darso had a change of heart. He said, the money ain't worth it. I've learned the error of my ways. I'm a good guy now. So he and Dog worked very well as a cohesive unit here. If only Dog wasn't so naive. Little did he know that he was being played like a fiddle the whole time. We had Magnum TA versus Doug Vines. It was 1983 Magnum TA versus Doug Vines. Didn't quite have the fire his matches did on Superstars in the Superstation a couple years later in Mid-Atlantic. He still won with the belly-to-belly. Just took him 3 minutes instead of 3 seconds like he did when he was white hot. We are seeing the growth, though. I mean, you could tell they're making a concerted effort at getting him more over with the fans with each passing month. Every time he's spotlighted, he gets more and more comfortable. I mean, it's a work in progress, but you could definitely see why Magnum had the reputation he did throughout his career. As short-lived as it was by and large. But he was a dedicated, hard-working guy that put in the steps, never lapsed, never got complacent. And you knew Watts was taking mental notes of that. That's why he got the push he did in '84. Then we had King Kong Bundy and the Missing Link versus Art Cruz and Mike Bond. Bundy and Max the Missing Link. There's a unique pair. Can't really say they complemented each other as a tag team. Mostly because it's impossible for the Missing Link to complement anything. There is something about the stark contrast in personalities where I'm like, you know, with the right set of heels, a duo like that could work. It's just Missing Link that's the problem. Yeah, that said, it was a harmless enough squash. Max did all his usual wacky offense that never makes any sense and nobody knows how to feed for. Bundy came in, eventually gave Bond a big splash off the ropes with a 5 count. I'm trying to remember how soon it was until Bundy went to Memphis. Because I know Watts is about to undergo that big talent exchange trade-off with Jerry Jarrett. I mean, that's how he ended up getting the Midnight Express and a couple other big names to join the roster. Terry Taylor, I think, was another one of those names. But that was in December, right? I think that would line up with the timeline. It just kind of hit me while I was watching this. Bundy's still around, but they just had him lose to the Junkyard Dog clean on TV the other week. Like, the whole thing with Bundy was that he was one of the most protected heels on the Mid-South roster throughout all of '83. He rarely ever lost a match, period. Much less taking a clean pinfall. So when the Dog beat him, like, in my mind, I processed that as, well, he must be leaving the territory. But I guess he did stick around for a little bit longer before he left. You know, it's unfortunate that in one of the last things he ever does in the region, they got him teaming with the Missing Link. He was better off in Memphis. Coming back, we had Mike Jackson versus Sam Hall, which is kind of interesting. A Mike Jackson feature, even though technically I still think they would count this as a standby match. I found it funny how Boyd and JR referred to these guys as heavyweights. They are both in the heavyweight class, with both guys weighing in between 200 and 210 pounds. Shows how much the business has changed over the years. I mean, Christ, fucking Johnny Martinez was outweighing these guys. And he was the ref. I mean, it's good, solid amateur wrestling. I truly don't think Mike Jackson was capable of ever having a bad match. Man, the more I see of him over the years, you want to talk about one of the most criminally underutilized talents in the business. I would easily put Jackson amongst the top 3. And that motherfucker is still wrestling to this day. At least I think he is. Where did I see a clip of him working last year? Was it TNA? I mean, he had less hair, obviously. But he was still in great shape. And people wonder, how is it possible? Well, when you don't take stupid, reckless bumps into furniture for your entire career, or get needlessly dropped on your head and neck over and over again, anything's possible. And Jackson won with a standing drop kick. A simple drop kick. Nothing fancy. That's our Alabama Junior Heavyweight Champion, folks. Proud of him. All right, fine. Future Alabama Junior Heavyweight Champ. I jumped the gun. And then with the remaining airtime we had, they played a special encore feature of the Loser Leaves Town match between Hacksaw Duggan and Ted DiBiase. The very last thing we saw from DiBiase in Mid-South before the exodus from the territory. Come to think of it, the last thing we saw from the Road Warriors before their departure. Obviously, we spent a good deal breaking down that match when we talked about it here on the channel. I'm not going to go bullet point by bullet point again. And I will say one thing, though, and then we'll sort of phase out of the Mid-South review for the week. You know, listening to the crowd during this match, the environment, the whole situation surrounding it, I don't really think they've reached that level of excitement on this program since that Loser Leaves Town match. You know, they've tried some stuff with Dog and General Akbar, Duggan and General Akbar. You know, they've introduced Nikolai Volkov as a top heel. So, I mean, Watts was definitely trying some stuff during this period. He was experimenting around and kind of seeing what worked versus what didn't. But man, you could definitely tell that there's something missing right now in the program. It's that top feud that the fans can really sink their teeth into. And I think you could trace that problem back to that match. Because once DiBiase left the territory, a lot of the air left with him. Because the truth is, we really don't have a top heel on the show right now that people can absolutely loathe with a passion. The kind of heel that the fans would pay money every week to see get their ass kicked. You know, the closest I think we have to that conversation right now would be Hacksaw Reed. But even Reed didn't have the nuclear level of heat that DiBiase did. And I think that's what kind of motivated Watts to meet with Jerry Jarrett at the end of the year and do some talent scouting. I mean, I don't think Watts ever really figured he would be doing any kind of talent exchange. But he definitely needed a roster shakeup. And he absolutely needed a fresh set of top heels that we knew would get real heat and be a needle in the spine of a lot of the Mid-South fan base. Enter stage left Jim Cornette and the Midnight Express. But it was something that really came to light when I was watching this segment. And I didn't really notice it over the last month or so of programming. But going back and looking at that footage again, listening to the audience here, comparing it to the audience in October of '83 where we are now, it's a different room. They're attending. The people are showing up to buy tickets. But they're just not as lively or into these shows like they were back in the late summer. So even though they only showed the highlighted footage here, I would classify this as a very important segment contextually. Who knows, maybe Bill Watts came to the same conclusion after he saw it again. Realizes he needed to make a bit of a change. You know who could have used a little bit of a roster shakeup in 1985? It was World Class Championship Wrestling. Someday I'll get the dates accurate when I'm typing up these shows. I literally can't do mental math in my head. I saved the document as the October 11th edition. It was actually the 12th. I think I messed it up last week when I was dating it on my Word document. That's why I double check with the network to make sure that whatever date is on the archive is the one that I title for the videos. I learned the hard way never to trust my instincts. So this was part one of the 1985 Cotton Bowl tape here at Texas Stadium. And I actually went ahead and looked at the comparison between last year's numbers versus this year's in terms of attendance. I was floored when I saw that they more than doubled their attendance from the first annual Cotton Bowl event. Back in 1984, they drew 12,000 fans. This year, 26,000. I could not believe it. And especially when you consider the '84 Texas Stadium card, it was 1,000 times more interesting than this one. But it goes to show that they still had a huge, passionate fan base that were willing to buy tickets. Even for lackluster cards like this one. Oh, spoiler, in case you're wondering, it does not trend upwards in '86. But yeah, 26,000 in attendance. Now, of course, I don't know how artificially inflated those numbers are. I have to assume there's a good amount of liberalism that went into that total count. I mean, it's always hard to gauge. We're talking about a football stadium here. Still, It was a packed house. And, obviously we only had a handful of the attraction matches booked for this week. I think there were 7 matches in total on the card. But obviously they only had an hour here, so they ran 3 matches this week. The first prelim they aired was Scott Casey versus Killer Tim Brooks. And that is why I call it a prelim, because there was no real backstory here. I don't even remember the last time I saw Brooks on the television show, much less him working a singles match. I know for a fact he wasn't doing anything with Scott Casey last I checked. Tell you the truth, I don't even know why they fucking bothered airing this. You know how sometimes I'll joke, so-and-so had a match with so-and-so that existed? That's exactly what this match was. After it was over, I'm like, do they do anything in this match? The answer was mostly no. It was like 4 minutes of boring chain wrestling. Gary Hart rammed Casey into the ring post on the floor, rolled him back in. Brooks gave Casey the leg drop of doom. That was it. 1, 2, 3. I mean, I wasn't expecting a technical classic here or anything, but God, this was so mundane, I had to convince myself that I even saw it air. Then again, that's kind of the story of a lot of world-class matches right now. At least when it comes to the undercard. I mean, the next match at least had a little bit of energy to it. The Fantastics making their return to the Dallas area temporarily, wrestling John Tatum and Dave Peterson. Also, for reasons that were entirely unexplained, Missy Hyatt is now out there as Tatum's eye candy. That was the first thing I noticed about the whole segment. And my exact quote, Missy Hyatt is here? The fuck? No, I'm serious. I totally forgot that she worked in Dallas. I didn't think Missy debuted in the business until she came to the UWF with Eddie Gilbert in '86. Because I remember those two were attached at the hip for the longest time. I guess she was dating John Tatum, though, before she monkey branched to Gilbert. There's a term for that in the wrestling industry. We call those ring rats. In the real world, we just call her a hooer. I know people are going to give me shit for that. I don't care. I never liked Missy. I always thought she was overrated. I mean, she was just a more robotic version of Tammy Sitch with big tits and a nice body. With like a quarter of her personality. She was still more appealing than Sable. Most valets were. I guess she's been feuding with Sunshine in angles that they already shot for the next set of tapings. So I presume we'll see them interacting together on TV soon. Oh, Bill Mercer gave us a heads up here too. There's the upcoming debut of Rick Rude and Percy Pringle to World Class. I liked his comment. I don't know much about Pringle. My immediate response was, you would by the return of the century, dude. Just wait. Oh, yes. Most of the match was Bobby Fulton and Tommy Rogers just kind of fucking around with the heels. Chastising Missy at ringside the whole time. Playing mind games and just having fun. Classic Fantastics match. There was a point here where Tatum and Missy started walking to the back. Fantastics are like, Where are you going? So Tatum looks back at the ring and goes, he pulled my hair. The things we need more of in pro wrestling. Heels threatening to get intentionally counted out for hair pulling. I mean, there were a couple fun moments here. Turning point was at the end when the heels tried to double team Rogers. But as Tatum was coming off the top of the double axe handle, Rogers broke free and the heels ended up colliding. So the Fantastics take control, ended up knocking Tatum out to the floor so Rogers could go up top and hit Peterson with a crossbody dive for the 3. And then after the bell, there was a brief altercation with Sunshine and Missy that actually ended pretty violently. This was a prime example of shit that would never fly on television today. As Sunshine tries to get in the ring and charge at Missy, John Tatum grabs Sunshine by the hair, dumps her out to the floor as hard as humanly possible. I was like, Christ, dude. I mean, they did not steer away from that male-on-female violence. Well, in all fairness, if we're trying to be impartial here, Sunshine kind of had it coming. I mean, what the hell did she think was going to happen? I'm not saying Tatum was right in his actions, but I mean, she had to figure that was not going to end well. I mean, like I said, everything was fine here. It's just, I guess the only problem here is that this is something to follow up on angles that they already shot. Like, we haven't seen any of this prior to the event. I had no idea Sunshine and Missy were at each other's throats. We never saw Missy Hyatt on any of the shows prior to this taping. That's why I was shocked when I saw her here. I was like, what the fuck is Missy Hyatt doing here? Like, I had no idea they were feuding. Much less care about the fact that they're feuding at all when we never even saw the footage of how it started. It's like they skipped chapter 1 of the book and immediately started the damn thing from chapter 2. Now, what company does that sound like? But hey, at least we know now. The girls hate each other. Now, there's a novel concept people can identify with. Wham and angry. And the final match they aired for the week was the Great Kabuki versus Mark Lewin. Could probably just skip to the last 3 minutes if I really wanted to. I mean, that's where the actual noteworthy stuff happened. Up to that point, it was your average Mark Lewin. I don't know what the hell he's doing, but it looks fake as fuck wrestling match. There was a point here where he kept stabbing Kabuki with a pen behind Rick Hazard's back, but he was making it so apparent that he was concealing it. I mean, all it did was bury Hazard for not noticing. And they get to the spot where Kabuki kicks Lewin in the corner, tries to go up to the middle rope, but Gary Hart trips Kabuki by shaking the ring ropes. And that leads to him and Kabuki going at it, which ultimately led to the DQ. From there, you got Hart and Lewin double-teaming Kabuki while Sunshine's pleading on the floor. And eventually Scott Casey runs in to make the save. Gary Hart's out there totally no-selling everything, not even registering, just totally burying the segment. I actually kind of got pissed at him. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing, dude? Sell. And, well, I'm not entirely sure what the hell they were going for in this post-match. So Casey and Sunshine are celebrating. And then from out of nowhere, Kabuki just runs in and starts going after Casey. So, presumably he turned heel? What his motivation was for doing so? I mean, who the hell knows? But he ended up leaving pretty pissed off. So I guess the great Kabuki got a little jealous of that Sunshine Scott Casey relationship. He's got feelings. I don't know. I got nothing. I mean, the Kabuki turn was definitely more notable than anything they did during the match. Guess we'll wait and hear what the explanation is for Kabuki's attitude change. To tell you the truth, if he's going to be feuding with Scott Casey in the interim, it's not exactly giving me high hopes for a Kabuki heel run. I have always preferred Kabuki as a heel over him as a babyface. You know, we've seen a little of it with him in World Class, the flip-flopping. I don't know, the babyface run always seemed a little bit off to me. Just with the presentation and the look. It just never fit. But we'll see. You know, again, this is only part one of the taping block here. I mean, we haven't even touched the attraction matches on the card yet. But this was almost a completely skippable first week of the Cotton Bowl event. I mean, unless you really want to see Missy Hyatt's rack, really nothing you need to go out of your way to see on this one. I guess the Kabuki heel turn left for a little bit of interesting conversation. We'll have to wait till the TV tapings to see how they explain all that. But that'll round out this Friday edition. So thanks everybody for tuning in here, and this is going to be a weird Monday show. I mean, it might just be the Retro Raw report. There's nothing WWE related. The next In Your House isn't until late October. I don't know what the situation is with this NXT library, but it's not looking too hopeful right now. So we'll just stick with the Monday show as Retro Raw. It'll be a shorter show, but hey, that'll be fine. Probably won't take 3 hours to upload the damn thing. So thanks everyone for watching, and catch you all soon. Take care. Peace out.